to Your Life Simplified. I'm Valerie Escobar, certified financial planner with Mariner Wealth Advisors.
And I'm Michael MacKelvie, certified financial planner, also with Mariner Wealth Advisors.
We're so happy that you are here with us today. We will be chatting about retirement plan rollovers. And really, this is something that is, pretty ubiquitous to everybody has this issue for the most part, right? You've working at one place, you have your retirement plan, you leave, you start working at another place, maybe you open up another retirement plan. Mike, have you ever seen anybody come into your office and they've got 4 retirement plans all over the place and they can't even remember working?
Yeah. It's kind of like a junk drawer, and you pull it open and you got just as time goes on, entropy has a chance to enter the group chat and just kind of mess things up. And you got accounts everywhere. And one of the most common things is, hey, I got these different 401ks, what do I do with them?
Exactly.
Should I roll these over? What do I do with them?
Yeah. And it's just one of those things that's on the to-do list that just keeps getting knocked down and further out. And so we really did want to address this because it is something that, that's real money, right? It's money that was, maybe it's just a couple of $1,000s, maybe it's a few $100,000. And we want to be able to do something with these and make them effective and useful for your future. And so once you find this statement that you have floating around in your junk drawer, what do we do with it? So first one, I think, Mike, let's have you chat a little bit about the idea of just moving it over to your new current employer.
Yeah. And some people, certainly take this option. They roll it over to their new company's plan. So maybe your new company also has a 401k plan, and you do have that option to then move that money over to the new company's plan. Typically what you have to do is call in and request a rollover distribution. They'll send a check out, and then you'll send that to your new company, get it straightened out, get it deposited. Some pros and cons of this real quick. I would say a pro of moving it to your new employer is the ability to take a loan off of that 401k. Now, by no means am I suggesting that you go out and start taking off loans for your 401k. I'm simply suggesting that this is an added layer of flexibility that you might not find if you maybe roll it to your IRA. So if you by chance have consumer debt or some high interest debt that is eating away at your overall net worth and just compounding, and it's not going to get forgiven by the government, you might consider taking a loan on your 401k and consolidating that debt, knocking away the high interest debt off of your, by using a 401k loan. So that's one pro to it. I would say another pro, which is probably true for a lot of the options, is the mental accounting. So you don't have 15 401ks after you work for 15 different companies. And finally, you might find that the new employer, this could be a pro or a con, the new employer might have lower fees, might have better plan options that align with what you're trying to do. So you just might have better services through that new employer 401k. Now, of course, the cons to this, I would say, are, also very much linked to the pros, right? So the fees might be higher with the new plan. You might have less options with the new plan. You might have less options than, an IRA rollover. So again, I would say some cons here would be just the lack of flexibility on investment options that you might otherwise have with a move to an IRA.
Yeah. And, so I've seen, people where that they don't necessarily have an IRA or they don't have anything, another advisor to help them out. And so they're just thinking, it's just the easiest thing. It's just move it from one plan to another plan, and then just keep it all in one place. And obviously you need to check with your new employer to make sure that the plan does accept rollovers. Most of them do. But yeah, that mental accounting, I think, is super important. The second option is moving it to an IRA. And again, this would be something that's a separate account that you have that's totally not tied to your employer at all. You would need to set this up on your own or with an advisor. And from there, you, again, call the old employer or the custodian, wherever it was, and ask them to do that rollover. And they'll usually send you the check, and then they can send it to the custodian. Or sometimes they'll do a direct transfer to the custodian. And this option is really helpful for a lot of the reasons that you talked about with the 401k, is that you do have in general, the whole world worth of investments available to you within an
Right.
IRA. You're able to, if you want really low cost ETFs, then you can pick that and, make it as aggressive as you want. If you decide down the road, you know what, I really want to convert some of this IRA to a Roth, it just makes sense for me the long
Hmm.
term. That's something that
Yeah.
you're at
That's a big
your
one.
disposal to be able to do that. Um, just being able to do something separate. And but I'd say the only downside is that now you're responsible for your IRA and not losing that, because it is going to be a separate plan from your 401k. But
Right.
as we're all learning to adult more and more, that's just got to be something else to add to our list of things that we want to be taking care of.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, with what tends to happen, over time is you maybe develop like one central IRA account that you just roll your company plans into, just
Right.
because you have more flexibility, and you're not paying like the typical admin fees that you are with a 401k.
Hmm.
Um, So the ability to buy individual security stocks, individual bonds, things that you just maybe can't do otherwise in a 401k. And then actually estate planning is another benefit I might throw in there. Nobody likes to plan their own mortality, so probably not thinking about that. But uh, a 401k might not transition as effectively as an IRA. So that's something else to consider. A 401k might actually just pay out the entire benefit at death, depending on how it's set up in your estate plan, whereas an IRA might transfer a little bit more effectively through the Secure Act. Um, I think really one of the final options outside of just leaving it where it's at. That's probably something we should mention. You could just leave it
Yeah.
where it's
You
at.
could just have a whole bunch everywhere. Why not?
Yeah, and just and keep it with your previous employer. I'd say the final option is a full distribution. And even though this is, I think, known as probably not the best option, I still get a lot of questions on this.
Hmm.
People consider it if they're maybe looking at how real estate has skyrocketed over the last decade. And they say, well, what if I just, cash out my 401k and bought a home? Or I think we want to buy a new primary residence and I need 100 grand. So I'm going to cash out my 401k. I would strongly advise against this in almost every circumstance, because there's just a load of taxes. And typically, when someone is requesting this, it's not for a hardship, which means they have to pay a penalty, that additional 10% penalty. So if you got state income tax, if you got federal income tax, if you have that penalty, now you might be looking at 40 to 50% of the total value of the 401k that you're going to have to just pay right off the bat. So you're walking away with maybe half the money or a little over half the money. So I typically strongly advise against this.
Hmm.
There are times, hardship, where it maybe is the only option. So it's never good to just speak in absolutes and say this never makes sense, but it is very rare that it does.
Right, right. And I would add too, when you get your rollover paperwork, right? So you've called your old employer, you say, I want to roll over, or distribute out of the plan. They'll send you a form. And one of the things it talks about is a lot on taxes, right? And this
Hmm.
is something that can trip people up, because really that tax election where you say, I want to withhold 20% federal and 5% state or whatever, that applies to the full distribution. This does not apply to rollovers. So rollover to an IRA or to your old 401k or your new 401k. So that part you can actually ignore. It's a non-taxable event.
Yeah,
So that's just something that I've seen that's pretty common.
good
Um,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think maybe to add, and this was, a little bit nuanced that doesn't apply to many people, but if you were at an employer and they contributed employer stock to your 401k, there is a way that you can just effectively distribute the cost basis of that stock. Put and then do a 60-day rollover and move that into your IRA, but then distribute the actual stock itself, the gain portion, to a taxable account.
Yeah.
This is a pretty complicated
Right.
strategy. It has all sorts of different terminology or names to it. Net and Rise is one that I've seen um, it called, but this is something you really want to work with an employer or with a advisor to get that going for you. But that is going to be one of those things that you're going to want to look at your 401ks and really know what's in there before
Mhm.
just sort of putting it in that junk drawer and saying, "Well, I'll wait for some other time."
Which again, it's just easy for that to happen as time goes
Hmm.
on. You just It's kind of like your room, right? You don't clean your room for a week, and suddenly there's stuff everywhere, right?
Right.
And so that opens the door for more mistakes, more forgetfulness. If you don't just have that one singular spot that you're looking at everything, you might have, and I see this all the time. Well, I forgot 5 years ago, I put $50,000 in cash because I was worried, and it sat there for 5 years, but you just haven't
Hmm.
looked at the statement in 5 years for some other
Yeah.
account. So, I mean, I think the behavioral component, uh, don't lose sight of that. We're all humans at the end of the day, and it's just helpful to organize this and, really keep it in a singular spot. And one other thing, maybe just to throw in there, is for IRAs, especially, like, the more money that you get under management in that IRA, the more potential options that you have, right? So, like, if you have 18 accounts with 50,000 or 20 accounts with 50,000, let's say, you probably can't be as strategic as you can with one account that has a million.
Hmm.
And it's like, you get just more as you cross these tiers. You gain access to new types of strategies, potentially discounted strategies, because you have more money in the strategy. So there's benefits to scale there as well, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I think something else that I would add is just a couple of issues that I've seen clients run into recently. Um, if you are of RMD age, so right now it's 72, if you have an old 401k or an old 403b and your IRAs, there's different RMDs, required minimum distributions, that have to happen, right? And so
Yeah.
you have all, like, even if you have 18 different IRAs, there's one RMD amount and you can just take it out of one IRA, which is
Yeah.
complicated, but it's better to consolidate. But at any rate, that works.
Great point.
But
Less
if you have
complexity.
another 403b, you need to take a required minimum distributions definitely directly from that 403b or 401k, whatever it is. You can't combine it with your IRA. So that
Yeah.
was an issue that, recently ran into, thinking that this was all consolidated, but it's not. It needs to be um, planned for separately.
Yeah.
And the last one that and I think this is new legislation that's coming out, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but the Social Security or Department of Labor, I think, is now starting to send out statements to people, to citizens, saying, we think, or there is an old retirement plan of yours from 20 years ago, and they still have the money, or the money's been directed to somebody else to hold it for you. We've had clients come in with these statements, and they are a mess. It's very difficult to go back and try and call companies from way back in the day. They don't know where your retirement plan is. They don't know what you're talking about. They've never heard of you. They're saying, call
Right.
this other company. So it can become pretty hairy to try and reclaim some of those old benefits.
Yeah. And, by 100% chance that you pass away at some point in your life, your beneficiaries would have to then track down
Oh
all
my
those different
gosh.
401ks.
Be nice
So,
to your kids. How's that? That's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
motivator.
yeah. So I think, more than anything, it's not like one account, just in closing here, it's not like one account just has like any magical, abilities that the others don't. They're all essentially vehicles that hold money and can hold different investments. But really, what, the benefit and power between kind of consolidating to likely an IRA, potentially just one 401k, is the mental accounting, and then also just less complexity and more options. Which I guess more options can lead to more complexity in other ways. But
Right.
I would say it's just typically easier to have one spot that you can manage everything, and there's some benefits to consolidating with an IRA in the long term. So hopefully everybody found that helpful. Again, we touched on the different options you have when you leave your employer. You can keep it where it's at. You can roll it to the new employer. You can roll it to an IRA, or you can take a full distribution. Always make sure to consult some type of advisor when you're going through that decision. This is Your Life Simplified. You guys take care.
Bye bye.
Mariner Wealth Advisors, or MWA, is an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Kansas. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with a prospective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the prospective client resides. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money. The views expressed in this podcast is for educational purposes only and do not take into account any individual personal, financial, legal, or tax considerations. As such, the information contained herein is not intended to be personal, legal, investment, or tax advice. Nothing herein should be relied upon as such, and there is no guarantee that any claims made will come to pass. The opinions are based on information and sources of information deemed to be reliable, but Mariner Wealth Advisors does not warrant the accuracy of the information. Asset allocation diversification is a strategy designed to manage risk, but it cannot ensure a profit or protect against a loss in a declining market. Certified Financial Planner, trademark, CFP, registered trademark, and federally registered CFP with flame design marks, collectively the CFP registered marks, are professional certification marks granted in the United States by Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc., also CFP Board. The CFP registered trademark certification is a voluntary certification. No federal or state law or regulation requires financial planners to hold the CFP certification.